Thank you very much, Wendy. Good day, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you, and I am hopeful that we will learn a little bit about PM 2.0. I'm going to try to keep my comments to about 45 minutes so that we have some time at the end for questions. I wish at the beginning that I could ask for a show of hands of how many of you are familiar with PM 2.0, but based on the number of times I've given this presentation, the answer is probably very few, which is great, because this is clearly the way project management is headed, and I'm anxious to share with you our experience thus far, and at the end of the presentation, get into some dialogue with each of you. I won't go into very much about my experience. Wendy has already shared that with you, other than to say that for the better part of 10 years, I was the CIO of PPL's international operation. And for 2 years, I lived in Argentina. For 2 years, I lived in Chile. And for the better part of 10 years, I traveled 26 weeks out of every year and had CIOs reporting to me from various countries. And most of the work that we accomplished was done via projects. And so this is something that I've grown up with, I've learned, and clearly this is the direction of the future. As Wendy mentioned, Computer Aid is a privately held corporation located in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. We currently, however, have operations on 6 continents in 20 different countries. And in large part, it's been our experience in managing international projects that has led us to develop and basically further the research into what PM 2.0 is all about. Now, to give credit where credit is due, much of this presentation is based on the seminal book called Project Management 2.0 by Dr. Harold Kersner. About 2.5 years ago, I had the very distinct honor of being invited to share the stage with Dr. Kersner at a PMI Professional Development Day in Detroit. There were approximately 300 project managers in attendance, and the entire day was focused on PM 2.0. So much of what you're going to hear today is derived from his book. There is quite a bit of original content in the presentation as well. But if you're looking for a single source to really understand in depth what PM 2.0 is all about, I strongly encourage you to read Dr. Kersner's book. Now, this is a bit of the agenda. What we're going to talk about initially is PM 1.0, because I believe quite strongly that you can't talk about PM 2.0 without going back to essentially what is PM 1.0, what is wrong with it, and what has led us to develop a replacement for it, essentially PM 2.0. We'll then talk in detail about what PM 2.0 is all about, and we'll talk at some length about some of the driving forces for new metrics. I'm not going to go into full detail because that's an entire hour-long presentation in and of itself. But I provide a lot of information in this presentation about metrics that I encourage you to peruse after the fact. And if you have any questions, I strongly encourage you to get back in touch with me. I do want to talk about some of the early adopters of PM 2.0, specifically who they are, why they felt that this is the way of the future. And I'll jump ahead and give you a clue right now. The #1 proponent of PM 2.0 is NASA. And we'll explain why that is and the success they've had when we get to that section of the presentation. And then finally, I'm going to give you some very concrete, very specific steps that each of you can take, quite literally starting this afternoon, if you want your organization to begin down the path toward the implementation of PM 2.0. Now, I will be happy to send a copy of this presentation to each and every one of you. All I ask is that you send me an email after the fact. I always include far more information in my presentations than we can possibly discuss in an hour. And I do that for 2 reasons. One, I want to give you as much information as possible. And 2, I want to encourage you to go back and review the presentation after the fact. And the fact that there's information there that we haven't covered is sort of an incentive to do so. Now, let's go back in time to Project Management 1.0. I personally believe that project management is part of our DNA. I honestly believe that this is how we are wired. I like to say that ever since the very first primitive man made a decision that I would be the one to chase the mastodon and you would be the one to stand at the bottom of the cliff with a spear to ensure that he's dead, we divided. We took a task, broke it down into essential components, we divvied it up, and that's how we approached work, and that's how we got things done. And so quite honestly, quite literally, going back as far as about 11,000 years ago, mankind has been building things, has been accomplishing things by way of project management. And as you can see here, we've accomplished a lot without the benefit of Microsoft Project, I might point out, in terms of building pyramids, Stonehenge, the aqueducts, etc. Everything that we have accomplished as a species has been done by way of project management. Now, modern project management, some people quite honestly believe that it did not occur until MS Project came about in the mid-1980s. My contention is that modern project management actually started during the Second World War, specifically with the Manhattan Project. It was such a large, complex undertaking with so many moving parts, with so much expertise required, and with so much collaboration needed for it to be successful, that it required a new way of looking at project management. Prior to that, projects were completed on a regular basis, and proof of that, in particular, is the completion of the Empire State Building. You may not be aware of this, but from the day that they began to dismantle the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, which sat on the block where the Empire State Building stands now, they didn't simply destroy it, they dismantled it to try to preserve as much of the architectural components as possible. From the day they started to dismantle that building, that hotel, to the day that the first tenant was handed the keys to his office in the Empire State Building was less than a year. A phenomenal feat of construction management and project management. And if you're interested in a fascinating book, I strongly encourage you to purchase the book called Building the Empire State. It is perhaps the best book you will ever read on project management, despite the fact that it has nothing to do with project management. It is actually a facsimile of the construction notes that were maintained by the construction management company that was responsible for oversight of the erection of the building. And what you see here on this slide is the actual Gantt chart, if you will, for the construction of construction of the building. Fascinating reading. And what's most interesting about it is that it is perhaps the first time that a construction management firm acknowledged that projects are not about things so much as they are about people. And they had innovation after innovation to make that building successful. One very simple example is that prior to building the Empire State Building, every large construction project in New York City required that at lunchtime, all of the workers had to descend from whatever floor they were working on to street level. They had to wander around trying to find a luncheonette, a place to eat, and then get back up in time to continue work. The construction management firm on the Empire State Building realized that that was a potential loss of productivity, a loss of time, and so what they decided to do is establish a luncheon canteen every 10 floors. And they hired the finest chefs in the city of New York to prepare lunch for the workers. And so at lunchtime, the workers simply had to go up or down 5 floors. They had access to a fine meal, and without wasting time wandering the streets, and they were then able to get back to work. Morale soared as a result of this, and productivity increased as well. And so this is a theme that we'll see throughout the discussion, that projects are about people. They are not necessarily about things. Now, what is right with PM 1.0? And the obvious question is it going to go away entirely, and is PM 2.0 going to replace it entirely? Some of the assumptions, as you can see on this slide, of PM 1.0